Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm sure that by now everybody's heard about this horrible terrorist attack that took place in New Zealand. 50 people were killed and at least 50 people were injured. There were terror attacks that took place at two mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. You know, the killings took place at Masjid Al-Noor and the Linwood Masjid in Christchurch, New Zealand. A horrific terrorist attack, all these innocent people killed. And before I go in further into this commentary, I just want to send my condolences to the victims of this horrific attack. You know, I pray that the victims be forgiven for their sins and that they be blessed with paradise. You know, this is a horrible situation. And I just want to take some time to talk about this and talk about issues that arise from this situation and things for us to reflect on. The perpetrator is a 28-year-old white man by the name of Brenton Tarrant. He's been arrested. He's been charged with murder. Before this killing took place, before this massacre took place, this man put out a 87-page manifesto, and that manifesto was full of racist rantings, trying to justify this horrific attack. You know, this man complained about immigration. You know, he talked about white genocide. This man complained about the growth of minority populations in New Zealand. He talked about how he was inspired by white supremacists such as Dylan Roof, and also another white supremacist that killed like over 70 people in Norway. And that white supremacist's name is Anders Behring Breivik, if I'm not mistaken. That man killed over 70 people again, and that was one of this guy's inspirations. That same killer, you know, the guy that inspired him, was also a racist, also spouted anti-Islamic views. Now, Brenton Tarrant claimed that he was motivated by a desire for revenge. That was one of his motivations. He said that it was in retaliation for a young girl who was killed during a terror attack that took place in Sweden. He also said this. He said, one of the reasons why he did this attack, he said this, you know, in terms of explaining why he did it. He said, to most of all, show the invaders that our lands will never be their lands. Our homelands are our own, and that as long as a white man lives, they will never conquer our lands, and they will never replace our people. This guy also went on to talk about how he was inspired by Candice Owens. And as you all know, this is a woman who goes around cooning for white supremacy. This is a woman that tries to justify, you know, and explain away racism in this society, try to pretend like racism doesn't exist. This is a woman who demonizes Black Lives Matter while she defends the police. This woman is a despicable human being, and the fact that you have a white supremacist inspired by her rhetoric speaks volumes in and of itself. It shows you what kind of lawn jockey this woman is for white supremacy. It shows you that she is a mouthpiece for white supremacy. You know that you're in a bad position anytime a white supremacist is inspired by your words. That tells you what kind of mentality this Candice Owens clown has. So this white supremacist who killed 50 people and injured at least 50 people was inspired by this woman. And we know what this woman is about. Like, she parrots this anti-immigrant nonsense that Trump talks about. This woman is a despicable human being. And the fact that you had this white supremacist inspired by her says so much about who she is. Now, I want to take some time to share my screen with you all briefly regarding Donald Trump. I want to show this article from CNN regarding Donald Trump's response to this situation. And there's so much that I have to say about this. So just bear with me 1 second. So as you can see here, Donald Trump made some comments that are controversial, to say the least, in response to this whole terror attack. You know, reporters asked him this. They basically asked him if he sees today's white nationalism as a rising threat around the world. And this is what Donald Trump said. I don't really. I think it's a small group of people that have very, very serious problems, I guess. If you look at what happened in New Zealand, perhaps that's the case. I don't know enough about it yet. They're just learning about the person and the people involved, but it's certainly a terrible thing. Now, I have to respond to this. And before I go into the rest of this article, I'm just going to provide my initial reaction to what President Trump said. You know, I just think that this epitomizes the fact that this president is delusional. It epitomizes the fact that this president is, in fact, a white nationalist, a white supremacist. This man was on record saying that he's a nationalist. There's nothing wrong with nationalists. This man hired a white supremacist nationalist to serve as his chief political advisor, Steve Bannon. This man has made statements that basically coddled white supremacists and defended white supremacists. After that Charlottesville riot that took place, that white supremacist riot and rally, this man said that there were good people on both sides, as you all know. Good people on both sides. You have white supremacists on one side, and then you have people that are fighting against racism on the other side. But yet this man, Donald Trump, said that there were good people on all sides, you know, some fine people on all sides. This is a man who defended the people's right to protest, you know, defended their right to rally behind these Confederate symbols, symbols of Black oppression, symbols of Black enslavement, symbols of Black rape, beatings, castrations, all kinds of crimes against humanity. This man celebrated these people. This man defended these people. So it's no wonder that these white supremacists rally around Donald Trump, support Donald Trump, because he speaks their language. He speaks the same anti-immigrant rhetoric, the same kind of rhetoric, basically, that motivates people like this terrorist attacker in New Zealand. Motivates people like that. One of those terrorists that in America who planted all these bombs and targeted all these people that were against Donald Trump. He was a Donald Trump supporter. This man, Donald Trump, has blood on his hands as well. And yet he goes on to talk about how there's no problem with the rise in white supremacy in the wake of this terrorist attack and in the wake of all these other terrorist attacks that have taken place. This tells me that this man doesn't care about racism in this country. This man is a sympathizer. This man is, in fact, a white nationalist and white supremacist. And that's the reason why he gives these people a pass, and that's the reason why these people embrace him. So I was not surprised at all when I heard these comments from President Trump. And the question that I asked these Black people that support Donald Trump, what is wrong with you? Why do you support somebody that coddles white supremacists? Somebody that is, in fact, a white supremacist? Why do you support somebody like this? This man is not fit to be president. This man is a despicable human being. Talking about there's no rise in white supremacy when we see all these terrorist attacks taking place in the United States. Again, this is no surprise. You know, despite all these terrorist attacks that have taken place in the United States at the hands of white supremacists, despite all these reports saying that white nationalists and white supremacists pose the greatest terror threat inside of the United States, This man decided to de-emphasize investigating these white supremacists and instead focus on foreign-based terrorist groups. And to me, that just shows you what this man is all about. It shows you just what kind of despicable, racist human being this guy is. So in this article, they cite all these facts rebutting what Donald Trump has said about white nationalism not being on the rise in the United States. They cite that, they say this: white nationalism is certainly a rising threat in the United States with plenty of evidence to back it up. They cite that terrorist event that happened in Charlottesville, where you had a white supremacist ram his car into a crowd of people, killing a woman and injuring 19 people. They cite the example of what happened not too long ago, where a white supremacist went into a synagogue and killed 11 people. This took place in Pittsburgh. 11 people. And I did a video not too long ago about this white supremacist, which they mentioned here, who was planning an attack. It says that a Coast Guard lieutenant, an alleged white supremacist, was arrested who planned an attack on several television anchors and elected officials. But yet you have this Donald Trump buffoon talking about how white nationalism is not on the rise in the wake of all these terrorist attacks and terrorist plans. This talks about how the Anti-Defamation League found that last year white supremacist murders in the U.S. more than doubled in 2017, with far-right extremist groups and white supremacists responsible for 59% of all extremist-related fatalities in the United States. And it says the year before they were only responsible for 20%. But yet you have this president talking about how white nationalism is not a rising threat in this country. This should, what happened in New Zealand should be a wake-up call for the United States. The United States, needs to focus on targeting these white supremacists, arresting these white supremacists, preventing them from engaging in these kinds of acts of violence. It's funny how the federal government had no problem destroying Black organizations, taking out Black leaders and arresting Black people simply for fighting against racism in this country. But for some reason, these white supremacist groups have been allowed to thrive under this president. He's pulled back on going after these groups. He's used federal agents to focus on these foreign-based groups, but not on these white supremacists. And that tells you about his priorities. That tells you about his allegiances. And the thing is, this president has so much blood on his hands. Even though this guy who committed this terrorist attack is in another country, he was motivated by the same kind of anti-immigrant rhetoric that Donald Trump spews on a regular basis. He was motivated by the anti-Muslim rhetoric that, I'm sure he was motivated by the anti-Muslim rhetoric of a Donald Trump. And if I recall correctly, he said something about Donald Trump in his manifesto. I would have to look to see exactly what he said, but I thought I came across something that mentioned Donald Trump. But we're talking about a president that had a whole travel ban designed to prevent Muslims from entering this country, sharing some of the same views as this white supremacist. So again, I am not surprised that this president denied the fact that white supremacists and white supremacy are on the rise. So I'm going to go through this a little bit further with other examples explaining how white supremacy and, this white nationalist threat is a very real threat. This article also pointed out how the Anti-Defamation League reported that propaganda efforts from white supremacist groups increased by 182% in the United States in 2018, causing the number of incidents to jump from 421 the previous year to 1,187. And they cite another group. The Center for Strategic and International Studies reported that the number of terror attacks in the US by far-right perpetrators rose over the past decade, more than quadrupling from 2016 between 2016 and 2017. So the bottom line is Donald Trump is wrong when he says that white nationalism is not a rising threat. This article talks about how domestic terrorism as a whole has seen a recent uptick in the US, with nearly 25 related arrests in the last 3 months of 2018. So let me stop sharing my screen for a second. Let me see what you all are saying before I go to the rest of my commentary. Yeah, and that's something else that I need to talk about real quick. So I'm talking about this serious stuff right here, and you got somebody in here talking about some ADOS nonsense. And, I'm just going to block this person. But that reminds me of another point that I wanted to raise in this live stream about these delusional ADOS people and these fake pro-Black people. Really is more directed at people like a Tariq Nasheed. You got this guy who talks about how we should hold back our vote and all that nonsense. This is the same guy that had a don't vote campaign. This is the same fool that was all on Twitter telling people not to vote. It's because of people like him that we end up with presidents like Donald Trump, who don't view white nationalism as a problem, who are in fact white nationalist sympathizers and outright supporters. Those end up being our elected officials when we quote unquote hold back our vote, when we have these people with these large platforms being so irresponsible as to tell our people not to vote. And, I just think that that's idiotic, man. It's idiotic to take that kind of stance. And that brings me, I just want to touch briefly on these ADOS people. A lot of them are so narrow-minded in their focus. I'm sure that some of them have said we shouldn't be concerned about what happens in New Zealand. I'm sure that there are plenty of these fake pro-Black people on here talking about we shouldn't be concerned about what happens there. That just tells you how narrow-minded these people are, how much they lack vision and stuff. It tells you how limited in their viewpoint they are. Because the same people that hate the Muslims, the same people that hate the Jews, the same people that hate the immigrants, these people hate your Black ass too. They hate you just as much as they hate the Muslims. They hate you just as much as they hate the Jew. They hate you just as much as they hate immigrants. But yet you want to pretend like because this happened at a mosque, then it's not relevant to you, even though this is a white supremacist, even though this is somebody that threw up white supremacist hand signals while in court. One day it's a mosque, the next day it's a church, a Black church, like in the case of Dylann Roof. So all these different groups who are victims of white supremacy really need to unite. Black people, Muslim people, Jewish people, immigrants, they have an incentive. They have an incentive to work together to fight against white supremacist groups, because these white supremacist groups are targeting all of us. All of us. And as you all know, I'm a Muslim. This issue is very important to me, not just as a Muslim, but just as a human being. And these people that want to say, well, you know, black first, and I'm not concerned about these other people. Well, many of those people that were in those two mosques were black people. Many of the people in the Muslim world are black people. And this man was targeting foreign, you know, he was targeting people because of their faith and because of their race. That's why he was targeting those people in the mosque. So this is your issue. And this goes back to this whole ADOS thing. Like, black people don't need to be dividing ourselves up when we have an enemy that's on the hunt for black people, when we have an enemy that doesn't make these kinds of ridiculous distinctions that we make among ourselves. You know, so that's why it's relevant, man. It's also relevant because we know how these white supremacists are inspired by each other. You know, they're inspired by one another. You know, I cited the example of how this terrorist in New Zealand was inspired by Dylan Roof and this other white supremacist. And who knows what white supremacists here in the United States will be inspired by this guy, will follow his example and carry out terrorist attacks at churches, at mosques, at synagogues. Who knows what's next? And that's a bigger reason for all these groups to unite against a common enemy. To unite against a common enemy, man. And I think that what we need to do, you know, what the Muslims need to do, what my black Christian brothers and sisters need to do, is we need to be prepared to defend ourselves, period. You know, our places of worship should be protected by us. You know, we can't allow just any old person to come up in our places of worship in the name of tolerance and all that kind of stuff. Just like in that case in Charlottesville, I mean, not Charlottesville, in Charleston, South Carolina, where you had Dylan Roof go up in that church. None of the people knew this guy. You know, this random white guy just shows up to a predominantly black church and nobody checks him at the front door to see what's up with him, to see if he's armed or whatever. Our places of worship, our institutions need to be protected by us, by any and all means necessary. We need to arm ourselves and defend ourselves, and there's nothing radical or crazy about that. That's being intelligent. That's doing what all civilized people do, defend themselves. You have a legal right to defend yourself and a legal duty to defend yourself. You have a moral duty to defend yourself as well, and to defend your community, and to defend your places of worship. And that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. And I'm sure, you know, there are, for instance, mosques that do have security. You know, whether we're talking about a traditional Sunni mosque or the Nation of Islam. I know that at my mosque, they ain't gonna let just anybody run up in there. You know, they have security and stuff like that. And like in the Nation, people get searched before they even come into a meeting in the Nation of Islam. We need more stuff like that so that people can be safe, so that we don't have these types of events happen in America or anywhere else. Here you have people just simply practicing their faith. These people weren't in no terror. The people that went to those mosques weren't terrorists or anything like that. They were engaging in legal activity, the right to practice their religion in peace. And you had this lunatic, you had this terrorist come in there and shoot the people. And it's truly sickening. And one thing that I have to address is just this whole thing about being replaced. You know, that was something that he mentioned in his manifesto, talking about they will never replace our people. That's something he said. And if you can recall, that's exactly what those people in Charlottesville was chanting when they were burying those torches at night, right before that race riot that basically took place there in Charlottesville. That's what they were saying. You will not replace us. The same slogan. A white supremacist group, all these white supremacist groups in the United States gathering together in the city of Charlottesville in large numbers, talking about you will not replace us, talking about blood and soil, you know, beating black people during that whole incident. And you had one person shoot a gun into a crowd, and you had another person again that rammed his car into a crowd. But yet and still, you had this president talking about white nationalism isn't on the rise. I think that is sickening again. And I have to emphasize that. And that's, again, another reason why these elections matter, man. We don't need somebody like Donald Trump in the White House. And as far as I'm concerned, if you are discouraging black people from voting, you are basically turning over the reins of government to these white supremacists. You know, these fake pro-black people on here claim that they are about empowering black people, but one of the main tools that we have to politically empower ourselves, our vote, is something that these people discourage black people from doing. And I think that some people, the way they're pushing this reparations issue, they are going to create an environment where you have a re-election of Donald Trump as well. You know, so again, that reminds me of that ADOS person that left this ridiculous comment here. You know, it's one thing to support reparations, but when you try to pin just Democrats into a corner on that issue, to me, that's suspect. You're creating a situation where you want them to openly support reparations and not realizing that to do so will alienate them from other voters and make it unlikely that they will be elected. And that will result in a Donald Trump being re-elected. I don't hear any of these ADOS people asking Donald Trump what his position is on reparations, or asking any of these Republicans what their position is on reparations. Based on how these people are acting, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't actually want, if they actually want Donald Trump to be reelected. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, based on how these people are operating, based on the fact that one of these proponents of this ADOS stuff, one of the founders of it, Yvette Carnell, is running, you know, actually did a video where she put on the hat. She was so hyped up about what Donald Trump was saying during a press conference that this woman actually put on Donald Trump's Make America Great Again hat. So these people are suspect to me. And, you know, Donald Trump, you know, his statements just crystallize everything for me. It just makes it obvious and clear that this guy is a white supremacist, a white supremacist sympathizer, a white supremacist supporter. So let me go to further to your comments, see what you all are saying. But before I forget, I have to talk about Candice Owens a little bit more. As I said before, this guy, this terrorist in New Zealand, was inspired by her words. I mean, it is just mind-blowing that a white supremacist would be motivated by a black woman. And that just tells you just how messed up this black woman has to be for a white supremacist to be motivated by you. This woman should be persona non grata, period. And, you know, the fact that she's given such a large platform, you know, she's all over the place, just tells you that she's a mouthpiece for white supremacy. These people put her in a position to serve that particular purpose. That's what they did. You know, this woman made some statements that were sympathetic to Hitler, talking about she didn't view him as a nationalist or something like that. And she said something about how there would be no problem with Hitler if he just confined himself to Germany and stuff. And then she tried to explain away all that stuff. These people pandered to these white supremacists. And it's no surprise that one of them would literally be inspired by her. But this, again, is the same fool that basically said that racism doesn't exist in this country, basically, if you boil down her statements to its essence. But anyway, let's go on to your comments. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that channel. Somebody said that I should tell my supporters to spam our rebel media. I need to learn more about them. I have to check them out, and I may do some response videos based on what I see. Yeah, I think that people should definitely express their views. Like, I'm not one of these people that's for censorship unless you're promoting violence. Like, I don't think that, we should censor people for expressing their views. I think that it's better for these people to be open so that we can watch them and monitor them and stuff like that and know what's going on with them. But I do think that people have every right to express their opposition and all that kind of stuff. And if they are promoting violence and stuff, those channels need to be shut down. And I don't have any problem, even though I think that people had a right to free speech and stuff like that, I also realize that here on YouTube, there are community guidelines that people have to adhere to. And I don't see anything wrong with people using those guidelines against these white supremacists to shut them down. Hold on, bear with me 1 second. Shout out to Bonafide. Shout out to Covina Man. Shout out to Delinda. Excuse me. Delena. Okay. Bonafide says sellouts in our community need to be put in check and silenced. Now we see that they not only give society cover, societal cover to white supremacists here, but psychological cover to violent extremists worldwide. Yeah, these people need to be checked, man. I think that's the best way to deal with these people like your Candice Owens is by challenging what they say, by refuting what they say, by debunking what they say, by deconstructing what these people say, and just exposing them for the frauds and the cons that they are. Here you had this woman pretending like racism doesn't exist. And as I posted on my personal Facebook page, this is a woman that sued over racism taking place when she was in high school. The same woman that criticized the civil rights groups was the same woman that relied on those same civil rights groups when she was a victim of discrimination. But here she is, a few years later, pretending like racism doesn't exist. This woman is a pawn. This woman is a peon. This woman is a puppet. This woman is despicable. Absolutely despicable, man. Yeah, so WTM said not only doesn't he care, he's doing what the media has always done: cover, deflect, make excuses for their degenerate behavior. Yeah, that's a good point, Ryan James. Ryan James mentioned that New Zealand is now working on tightening gun control laws. That's important. And that's what we need to have here in the United States: tighter gun control laws, but Congress refuses to act because Congress is bought and paid for by the NRA. I mean, the NRA floods Congress with all this campaign money, all this support, and it silences a lot of these Congress people. They're silent because they are bought. So in the wake of all these violent attacks that have happened in the United States, these congressmen do nothing. Even when their own have been victims of gun violence, Congress did absolutely nothing. You had 2 members of Congress shot. One suffered brain injuries. Another was in the hospital for an extended period of time, but Congress still refused to act. When one of those mass murderers killed children, Congress refused to act. Congress should be ashamed of itself. In the wake of all those attacks like that Las Vegas shooting where this guy killed all those people, Congress did nothing. When that white supremacist shot 2 black people in Kroger's parking lot, Congress did nothing. When Dylan Roof shot up that church, killing 9 people, Congress did nothing. And it's a damn shame, and we need to elect new members of Congress. We need to check these members' records on gun control laws and vote them out if they're opposing reasonable, intelligent gun control laws. We need laws to protect the people, because this animal, this terrorist in New Zealand, from what I understand, he legally purchased his weapons. He had license for these weapons. And this man went to 2 different mosques, just killing people, massacring people. And he actually filmed some of this stuff on Facebook or something, Facebook Live or one of those social media sites. So yeah, I mean, that's a very important point about working on tighter gun control laws. That's what we need in the United States. So WTM said they need to tighten white males. That's the real problem. Yeah, that's definitely a problem. A problem that this society refuses to acknowledge, man. They refuse to acknowledge that, white men are the primary perpetrators of these types of crimes. And despite that, they're not racially profiling white men. They judge white men as individuals. But when it comes to black people, when it comes to Muslim people, when it comes to any non-white person, they want to judge them as a collective, especially black people. And shout out to WikiLeaks. Let me show Covina Man's comment. Yeah, unfortunately, what YouTube does is, like, if somebody comments, they automatically hide certain types of comments. So I just want to pull your comment back up. Yeah, Covina Man said that these don't vote Negroes are actually very pro-Trump. And that's true, man. Because you have a lot of these people actually on record saying that they want Donald Trump to be in the White House because he's going to make things so hard that we have no choice but to rise up. I know that Farrakhan's on record saying something like that. And I'm sure a lot of these others have followed suit as well. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, WTM is correct about white supremacy being a global threat. I mean, you see these terrorist attacks happening all over the world, man. Somebody said the Neanderthal is fearful of being marginalized, even when people like him stole and manipulated the whole planet. Yeah, I mean, they are. That's their whole fear, and that's what a lot of these people don't understand when it comes to this anti-immigrant stuff, man. You got black people jumping on this anti-immigrant bandwagon, like Yvette Carnell and that guy Antonio's Moore. They're jumping on this anti-immigrant bandwagon, not realizing that what they're doing is, in fact, just supporting white supremacy. The reason why these white supremacists oppose immigration is because they want America to remain a white country, a white-dominated country. They don't want to see white people become a minority. That's what they fear. They fear the browning of America. They fear other groups coming to this country, bringing their culture and bringing their traditions and all that kind of stuff. That's what they fear. And that's why they are so anti-immigrant. And it's just crazy that you have black people jumping on this anti-immigrant bandwagon and actually being against their fellow black people who happen to be immigrants. Somebody said there are African American Muslims that believe that they are immune to white supremacy. I don't know about that, but you do have some people who are Muslim that downplay, they downplay race and downplay racism and stuff like that. They downplay it. They try to ignore it, try to pretend like it's not an issue, try to, say we shouldn't be focused on race issues and stuff like that. And I think that that's a mistake. And this whole terrorist attack is a prime example of that. It's time for everybody to wake up to reality and understand what's going on in this world. Nobody is immune from white supremacy, man. No one. But yeah, that's a valid point, because some people do take that position. They don't even want to talk about race. They want to pretend like race is not an issue and stuff like that. I mean, you have racism even in the Muslim world, where Muslims are supposed to believe that people are judged not by their skin color, but by their piety, by their regardfulness for God and stuff, by their righteousness. But unfortunately, again, there are many people in the Muslim world that are racist, just like in any other type of society, whether we're talking about a socialist society, a capitalist society, a dictatorship, a democracy. We see racism transcends even religion or in politics often. Yeah, many African American mosques, and the proper Arabic term is masjids, do have security. A lot of them do have security. Again, like where I go to the mosque, there's security and stuff like that. But often the security is unarmed, and I really think that security should be legally armed and prepared to defend the people. I think that that's just intelligent, man. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And I think in the meantime, around this country, police need to step up their efforts to protect these communities. Whether that means having a police officer stationed outside of some of these, mosques and, synagogues and other places of worship. And I know it's a huge task to protect all these places, but something has to be done, man. Yeah, that's the question that I have to ask too, Roderick Thomas. Why aren't they addressing Donald Trump? I mean, you got these ADOS people all up in the face of these Democratic candidates, even progressive candidates that have talked about doing different things to reduce disparities. But these people got a one-track mind. They just want to focus on reparations, something that's way down the line. I don't see reparations happening anytime soon, especially with the makeup of Congress, man. You got many Democrats that don't support reparations, and a lot of those Republicans don't support reparations. And no matter what kind of pie in the sky stuff these candidates tell you to make you feel good for a vote, we know that the president alone is not going to get some reparations passed. You need Congress to do that. So yeah, I mean, that's a very valid question that I've raised. Like, why aren't they in the face of Donald Trump, the president? Why aren't they pressing this reparations issue towards him? A man that actually has some power to do something. Why aren't they pressing this reparations issue to the current members of Congress? Instead, they're focusing all their energy just on these presidential candidates. That tells me that they're disingenuous. That's what it tells me. And, I think that instead of being all abstract with this reparations issue, we need to have a unified voice on this issue and focus on getting HR 40 passed, a study of reparations. That's what needs to happen initially. Shout out to David Bowman. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, Wiki Lead said, I fail to understand, even after so many school shootings, people still defend the NRA. I don't get it either, man, because it makes no sense. There's one thing for people to have a right to bear arms, and I support the right to bear arms. I just talked about how we need to be prepared to defend ourselves, but I support reasonable gun control. I don't think that anybody should be able to have any weapon and all this and that. you got a president that's given like, you know, making it easier, wants to make it easier for people to have guns instead of having restrictions on people getting guns to keep the people safe and stuff. So Def Rocker said those mega hats symbolically mean white supremacy. Yeah, because they're saying make America great again, and really that's just a code word for make America white again. You know, and those hats and stuff like that became popular, you know, during Donald Trump's campaign, and at the time you had a black president in the White House. So they're saying we want to go back to a time when you didn't have no black president. We want to go back to a time when you didn't have all these immigrants of color coming to America. That's what these people are really saying. And you got some black people that are dumb enough, that are stupid enough to be running around here with that mega hat on. Delano said, the media always makes excuses for white terrorists. Yeah, I mean, that's true. They make excuses for them. They try, first of all, after many of these attacks, they don't even want to call them terrorists. After many of these attacks, they don't even want to address whether or not it's a hate crime. They put that to the side. They're like, we can't say yet that it's a hate crime, even though it's like clear and obvious that that's exactly what it is. They deal with these white supremacists with kid gloves. You know, I was watching, you know, I saw something on social media where they compared the covers of the same magazine, you know, addressing two different terror attacks. They had one example where they were dealing with a Muslim, you know, an Arab or something like that, and they had another example dealing with a white man. The one dealing with the Arab was obviously demonizing the Arab, you know, showing no sympathy, and rightfully so. If you commit a terrorist attack, you should be demonized and ostracized and attacked. But then the cover featuring this white guy, this article about this white guy, tried to make people have sympathy for him, talking about like how he grew up in such a great environment and nobody knows how this angelic white boy became a terrorist. So they deal with things completely different. And that's a valid point. Yeah, and Bison for Life said ADOS YouTubers are monetizing this to get paid with no plan. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. And I could do a whole video just on that, but that's going to get me off track. But that's a valid point. Yeah, that's a good point. WikiLeaks said, did you notice that the New Zealand shooter called immigrants invaders, just like Donald Trump? Just like Donald Trump, because that's exactly what he was calling those quote unquote caravans, you know, calling them invaders and stuff like that. And many Republicans echoed that rhetoric. And then you had Donald Trump, like as WikiLeaks says here, Donald Trump denied that he enabled white supremacists or nationalists. Bison for Life said, my church has armed guards. Yeah, that's a great thing. You know, that's what needs to happen. Yeah, and I definitely support reparations. And, you know, as WTM is pointing out, I support reparations as well. Like, I support it, but for me, I'm not a one issue type of person. I'm not going to rule out a progressive simply because I disagree with them on reparations. I'm not going to do that, especially when I see that the alternative is Donald Trump remaining in the White House for 4 more years, being in a position to appoint even more justices to the Supreme Court, to take the court even further to the right, and even appointing even more judges on the federal levels, like in terms of the Court of Appeals and the various district courts around the country. Those types of things have very real impacts on our rights in this country, on our civil rights, our civil liberties, our basic human rights. So these elections matter, man. And I'm not going to be some one horse type of voter where I'm just focused on reparations. As much as I support reparations, and I think that we should press candidates on them, but we should press all candidates on them, not just Democrats. We should press that issue on elected officials. I mean, why are people just focused on the Democrats that are running for president? So Bonafide asked me if I believe that intelligent people like Yvette Carnell wear those mega hats, who wear those mega hats, actually believe in the mess, or are they perhaps doing it for attention or effect? I know for a fact that Yvette Carnell is sympathetic to Donald Trump. Like the things that she says in support of some things about him tells me to some degree that she supports Donald Trump. The fact that she was getting all hyped up and getting all basically moist over Donald Trump's press conference, that tells me that she admires something about him. The fact that she is echoing his same xenophobia and anti-immigrant rhetoric, that tells me that she actually supports some of his stuff. And it's very disappointing, man. It's very disappointing to see. I mean, even though I know she disagrees with him on some issues, obviously, but I think it's very telling that she would actually invest. I mean, even though her hat is cheap, that she would actually invest money in that garbage and actually put it on her head doing one of her own videos. Again, that photo that I've used in my thumbnails is not doctored. That's actually her putting on that hat. And you got people like, what's his name? Afro Synergy, man. Somebody that's supposed to be some kind of black nationalist or whatever, co-signing Donald Trump, rooting for Donald Trump, supporting Donald Trump, being an excuse maker for Donald Trump. I wonder what the hell he has to say about this situation and all the parallels that are tied to Donald Trump and the white nationalist movement that Donald Trump basically supports on the low. Shout out to Real Aaron Collins. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I know that she's against some aspects of Donald Trump, Ray Gunn. I understand that, that's obvious. But, the fact of the matter is she supports his anti-immigrant stance. That's undeniable. But yeah, with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. Hopefully, I'll be able to get back on track with producing regular content on this channel. So you all look out for that. Also, I want you all to support my second New Possibilities channel. If you go to my page here, you will see it listed as one of the related channels. I plan to do some videos about some more positive news in the Black community. I want to talk about the situation with Queen Latifah building housing in Newark, I believe, and some other important stories. I did a video over there about the work that Jaden Smith is doing in Flint, providing water filtration systems to the people there and providing them with water. So we need to uplift those kind of stories, as much or even more than these other types of bleak type of situations like this particular story we're talking about right now. But yeah, with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings. Thank you for tuning in. Please rate, comment, subscribe. hit that notification bell to so you'll be notified as soon as I post new content. Also, financially support this channel. Like, if you like what I produce over here, show your support by making donations to this channel so that we can increase the quality and time, and just to show support. I mean, we give money to all kinds of other things that really don't matter, but we're talking about issues that matter to our people over here. So I thank you for all of your support in various ways. Peace and blessings to each and every one of you.